On this episode, we smoke the Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro. We talk about Cigar Vitolas, and we have a lot of fun. Welcome to the show. Burn Line Podcast. The burn line on a well-crafted cigar is straight and sharp as a razor, much like our wit and wisdom. And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Burn Line Podcast. I'm your host, John Thacker Jr.
And I'm your host, Keith Luter.
And we are coming to you not live from the hot box, the smoke-filled back room of the Blanco Cigar Lounge, Union Cigar, Hanover, Pennsylvania, USA. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, John. How are you?
I'm doing well, enjoying this fantastic coffee.
Oh, this is great stuff, man. Once again, this is the Lincoln Blockade from River Bottom Roasting.
That's a good coffee. So this week, we are smoking the Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro. So the last couple of weeks, we've smoked some lower-end cigars, or more affordable cigars, and so we're going to the opposite end this time, right to the top shelf, huh?
That's right.
So what we are smoking here for you guys, since this is audio only, this is the box-pressed figurado, which is kind of a rare Vitola. You don't see a lot of these.
Very unique.
Yeah. Which, fits in because we're going to talk about Vitolas today, right? Which is the size and shape of your cigar. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But before we get to the official cutting and lighting of this cigar, just a few notes. First of all, the presentation. This cigar retails here at Union Cigar Hanover for $17.25, while a box of 10 will set you back $138, a savings of $35 over the stick price. That's basically like getting 2 free cigars. And it is a 6.5 by 52 figurado, box pressed. The presentation is interesting for, I guess, where this sits in the food chain. The box of 10 sort of communicates exclusivity. The golden brown label, which is, a staple of Oliva, really presents their brand, I think, well, and it has a very, to me, this reminds me of like a 64 Buick Riviera,
Ooh, okay.
like it's got that elegance, that little muscle car, that, gentleman, but there's something underneath, like Wolf in a 3-piece suit type of look to the branding. And I think the reason for that is that the actual wrapper is pretty rustic. Like the presentation of the physical cigar is pretty rustic, but then it's surrounded by some pretty nice labeling, branding, boxing, or whatever. So, yeah, taking The Rock and putting him in a 3-piece suit or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
That's how it kind of comes across to me.
It comes across to me like a Wonka bar from Willy Wonka. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That's what it puts me in mind of. It's like it has this nice classic look to it. It's just nice looking. Just a little bit of gold to it. It's nice. I like
It's
this a lot.
not pretentious.
Exactly.
Right?
And
it's
I see
nice
that,
but not pretentious.
I see that a lot in cigars, man. And I don't really see it in this one.
Good. Well, before we officially cut and light our cigar, I'm going to remove the Melanio band. So there are 2 bands, the Oliva Serie V band and then the Melanio Maduro band. And the reason I'm going to do that is it is sliding all over the place, and I don't want to accidentally slide it into my cherry because I don't pay as close attention when I'm podcasting. And the other one slides right off as well. I really appreciate that on a $17 cigar. I do not want to tear up my wrapper getting the label off.
Oh, that came off like butter. You see that? Just whoop,
Yeah, it just slides off. And I think
Real
part of that's
quick.
the shape.
Yeah.
Right? And it is time for our official cutting. And we are going to clip this cigar with authority. And, of course, I have to do several clips because my cutter has a backstop on it. Ooh, I don't know if that's going to work.
Do you want this cutter?
No, I don't know if it's going to work because of the shape of the figurado until I light the end. I don't know the strength of the draw.
I see.
And I was explaining last week that the resistance in the draw is one of the surprisingly highly rated aspects of my cigar smoking experience that affects the amount of enjoyment I get out of the cigar. So it feels like a tough draw, but I don't want to clip more off until I light it.
Right.
And get the actual draw, because the end that I'm about to light right here, you can see how it's constricted with the figurado wrapper.
Right.
And so until that kind of opens up, it's going to be restricted. So it is time for the official lighting of the cigar. And as always, we remind you, toasted, not roasted.
Toasted, not roasted. Toasted, not roasted. Toasted, not roasted.
It's toasted. I get it.
So today, Keith, I have a type of lighter
that's
that we
different.
did not discuss
Yeah.
last week. We are definitely not going to say the brand name of the cigar lighter, partly because this is a Chinese knockoff that cost probably $1,000 less than if this was the name brand. But this is a soft flame butane lighter. And the benefit is
That's interesting looking.
you cannot roast your cigar with this. Just like with the Zippo or an open match, it's a soft flame. You can't blow it away. The downsides are it just doesn't hold up in any kind of breeze whatsoever. So we didn't talk about soft flame butane when we talked about types of lighters, so I thought I would throw that in there. I really like it because, you can't screw up your cigar with it. But the flip side is it's not as precise. The flame, wobbles around, unlike with a jet, although it does burn a little cooler. And the best part about it, you can feel the top of the lighter. It's completely cool.
Yeah. Okay.
I had that on for 7 seconds there,
Right.
and cool to the touch. So, yeah, a knockoff of a French brand of lighter that we're not going to mention on the show because fuck those guys until they pay me. So, Oliva, Serie, Melania, Maduro. A little bit about this cigar. It is a 6.5 by 52 figurado box pressed, as we mentioned. Cigar Snob gave it the Cigar of the Year award in 2021 with a rating of 95. The wrapper, it's a Mexican San Andreas wrapper. San Andres. The binder and filler are sun-grown in the Jalapa region of Nicaragua. And let's take a few puffs and see what we're tasting.
Right off the rip, I get a lot of cocoa, I get a lot of espresso, and a little bit of spice. Right off the rip. That's very prominent.
Yeah. I think the dominant flavor for me right now is actually the cedar.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely like the cocoa, but to me it has sort of a sweet and sour kind of
Okay.
taste. And I think that, it's not a citrus sour. It's like a cedar sour.
Right.
Not as much earth as I would expect. We'll see how it burns down with the San Andres wrapper. Usually expect a little, earthy, dirty. And from the sun-grown Nicaraguan, I do expect some pepper, but I'm not picking that up yet. Right now, I would say it's like sweet and sour.
Okay.
Cocoa and cedar, primarily.
I definitely get like a leathery mouthfeel to it as well.
And, let's not get too generic. So instead of cocoa, I'm going to say dark chocolate.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So not sweet chocolate, but
Yeah.
you know how dark chocolate has like that sort of bitter sour thing.
Right.
But definitely chocolate for sure.
Yeah.
To me, here's what this tastes like. This tastes like if you get one of those little bars of dark chocolate that come in like the purple wrapper and say like, 90% ground up cocoa bean, type of deal that costs like $9.99 for 2 square inches or whatever. You get one of those. If you took that and you just threw it up in the air and smacked a home run with a cedar baseball bat,
Okay.
and then you licked the bat, that's what the cigar tastes like.
Okay. All right. Did you ever go? Are you a Starbucks guy?
I mean, I go from time to time. Obviously, until they pay for advertising on the show, I'm not a Starbucks guy.
Right.
But continue.
Well, I haven't really found them anywhere else, but there's these little chocolate-covered, like espresso beans,
Uh-huh.
and that's what this reminds me of.
You know, that's a really good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Like dark chocolate over an espresso bean. Yes. Yeah. And I'll tell you something else. Like, I'm waiting for this to burn down because I'm in the first half inch for me. The feel of the smoke on my palate is different. Like,
Right.
to me, it feels like someone is like dragging a silk handkerchief across the top of my palate. Like, it's really silky. And,
Right.
like, you know, some smoke is chewy. You know, some is just there. This almost feels like cream and silk, the actual smoke. You feel that? Like when you
do.
hold it in the back of your palate, especially if you're going to retro ale?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not harsh by any means. It's a very smooth finish to it, I guess
Yeah.
you could say.
Yeah, and that's the actual smoke itself. So we are going to talk about Vitolas a little bit later, and so we thought it was fitting to smoke a figurado, right, instead of kind of your typical Toro or Robusto. And I will tell everybody out there a little secret. When I have the opportunity to buy a specific cigar in a figurado, or we'll talk about some other Vitolas, but anything other than your standard round cigar, I buy it. And the reason I do is it takes more skill. And so the guys that are wrapping this cigar, that are rolling it, are the more skilled rollers. And so you're much more likely to get a good, highly consistent cigar with this Vitola as opposed to the one that, you know, the guy that graduated from rolling school 2 days ago can roll, right?
Yeah, some of those guys, they got to be rolling for about 8 years before they get trusted with some of the more finer smoke.
Yeah, that's correct. So to me, it's like a risk reduction strategy.
Right.
Unless the available Vitolas, you know, I don't like the Figurado. I like the Parejo. Then I will. So, for example, if I, you know, have a, I don't know, Presidente versus a Petite Corona for a cigar like the Killer Bee, you know, from Blackworks. Well, I'm going to get the Petite Corona because anything more than that, I can't smoke. I'm going to put it out.
Palate wrecker for
It's
sure.
a palate wrecker, you know. So there have been times, like, can you imagine if Padron's little hammer came as a big hammer?
Oh, God.
There's no way, man. Like, I'd be passed out. So there are some exceptions, but just as a risk mitigation strategy, if I have the choice of a Figurado Vitola versus a Parejo Vitola, I'm going to choose the Figurado because it requires a higher skilled roller, and so you're more likely to get a well-constructed cigar.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I found out that some of these rollers, you know, due to the skill that is needed for that specific, you know, Vitola, some of them, they're very exclusive, if you will. Like, for example, I believe I remember hearing that the pipe-shaped cigar from DBL, they only make about 18 of those a day.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
I got to get my hands on one of those for my collection humidor. I just have a few, because I believe cigars are meant to be smoked. I smoke everything, but there's a few that I save. I saved the second-generation Reserva that we smoked the other week on the podcast because it's a damn good cigar.
Heck yeah, it is.
Limited to 500 boxes. And someday, you know, I'll go back and smoke that. In 2022, this was a phenomenal value cigar, right?
Yeah.
From Dominican Republic, and I'll remember, you know. So I've got a few from LCA because they're never coming back, you know. But I want that pipe, that pipe cigar, just because of what it is.
Yeah, they have a pipe, but they also have a baseball bat. And I don't know how many they make a day for the baseball bat, but I know that pipe, it's about 12 to 18 a day.
Mm-hmm. And there's only one person probably that can.
I believe
roll
so.
in the whole factory, yeah. All right, so now that we're a little further in, like we're firmly into the first third now. I will say the pepper has picked up. Definitely has a creamy component. Part of that is mouthfeel, right? The feel of the smoke. I wouldn't say that it tastes like cream, but it's a creamy experience.
It has that texture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it has a very almost surprisingly sophisticated texture because the cigar looks rustic. And then you smoke it and it's like very fine. Also a little surprising because Mexican San Andres wrapper, those are kind of famous for being like dirty, earthy, strong wrappers. Padron uses that, for example, right? It's not as strong as I thought it would be. Like, where would you peg this in the strength right now?
Honestly, first impression, I'd probably put this in the light to medium, but it's not by no means. This is definitely a mid to full bodied cigar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say right now it's smoking mid full, but I think it's also a little bit of a sleeper in the sense that it's so smooth,
Right.
and the flavors work together so well that it feels like a little milder than it actually is.
Right.
And I can tell because when I do that thing with my tongue where I do the palate check, I rub my tongue against my palate, it helps you retaste the cigar.
Right.
And when you can retaste all of the flavors, it's fucking hitting your taste buds.
Right.
This is actually a really strong full cigar. But because it's not punching me in the throat, I think it feels milder than it is. So I'm pegging it at mid-full right now. It wouldn't surprise me if it picks up to full or even really full as I smoke it down. But we're going to find out, right?
Yeah, it certainly will hit. It will certainly hit that full-bodied range here soon. But like I said, it's I don't know the right word for it. It's just very tricky, if you will.
Mm-hmm. I also noticed it is smoking very cool.
Oh,
which is
yeah.
probably why it's so creamy and enjoyable. Yes, this is a superbly constructed cigar. Look at the way the ash looks.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and both of us have a nice burn line, which is kind of important considering what we named the podcast, right?
Right. Yeah, I didn't fuck mine up this week. It's just I don't want to fuck up our poker table here.
Right.
I don't want to screw up the table by ashing on it, so I'm very, very cautious to ash out a little bit. But I will say it will hold its ash. The burn line holds, and it just looks great.
Yeah, so for all of you guys that are out there joining us, we're in the hot box. It's a back room back here at the Blanco Lounge, Union Cigars, Hanover, Pennsylvania, USA. We have got a snack machine. We have got a push-in prizes,
Like a coin drop.
machine. We've got cigar lockers, coolers, propane, random shit, and we are set up on a round poker table. This is your poker table.
Right. Yeah.
We've enjoyed a game or two, a hand or two of.
Oh, and I crushed them. You guys should have seen
yeah,
it.
yeah. Okay, just because I left. If I hadn't had to leave.
I swept the house. That's Dallas.
Rematch.
Listen,
rematch.
the house always wins. We know this.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I learned that lesson the other week. John, the owner, came in the other week, and we're playing for cigars. It's a cigar to $10 below to buy in, and my God, that man cleaned house. I learned my lesson that night.
Why do you think they call me the house? So, no, but this is a really cool smoky backroom setup. Honestly,
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's got that feel, like it's almost like we're pirates, smoking these cigars,
Right.
or mafiosos or something. So I would say at this point, we're firmly into the first third. Definitely dark chocolate. The pepper has picked up. The cedar has stabilized. And there's a little nutty component. And I think that goes along with like the creamy silk, almost like if you took a mouthful of cashews, like how it makes your mouth feel.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
That's actually a perfect description. I like that.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we are with the Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro. With that, I think it is time for our tobacconist tip of the week. And now your tobacconist tip of the week from Keith Luter.
Right, so our tobacconist tip of the week. Let's go over purging your lighters.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go to refill your lighter, you may notice that it's not sparking, it's not flaming up. That's because you have to purge it before you fill it.
And we're talking about butane lighters.
I'm sorry, yes, butane flame lighters.
Yep.
So with that, one of the ways that we have the shop here, one of our methods is that we take a previously used, an empty butane can,
Yep.
poke some holes in the bottom of it. Just make sure it's empty, because otherwise it's gonna come back at you.
Uh-huh.
But poke some holes in the bottom and use that as a purge can, because what that's gonna do now, instead of taking like a screwdriver or a pin tip to your lighter and possibly breaking that tip, now it's gonna be a perfect fit, and that purge, it's going to go right into the can instead of all over your hand.
Right.
It's a perfect fit every time, and that's going to perfectly expel any of the
extra air.
The extra
keeps it
air
from
and
filling up.
butane. You're right.
Yeah.
And that's going to leave it for when you refill it, recharge that butane lighter. It's going to be perfect every time.
See, I really like that because I have a couple of lighters, like this electronic Perdomo lighter. The metal surround of the nipple has a cross cut in it that you put the screwdriver in to turn it up and down. So it doesn't have like the thumb wheel or something easy. And so because of that, it's a very narrow fit around that nipple. If you slip a small screwdriver in there, you risk damaging the metal surround that changes the flame strength. And if you use a pen, because there's not space to really slip a ballpoint pen off to the side, it's actually going to blow the ink back up through the pen. And I've ruined quite a few pens that way, so I always use a cheap pen when I do that trick. So next time we have an empty butane can, just poke some holes in the bottom. It fits over the nipple perfectly. It's designed to. And now it lets the gases out so you can refill properly and all the way up. I like that. That's a great tip. Thank you, Keith.
Absolutely.
I'm going to use that one. I hadn't actually heard of that one before.
Not many shops have purge cans, but I learned that trick from Ron, from our Blanco rep. He had came in asking for our purge can. I'm like, our what? And that's when he had told me about this trick of the trade, and ever since then, I've been using it daily.
Well, thank you for that, Keith. And a little note on the cigar. I don't know where you're at, but my strength has picked up pretty considerably as I near the second third. I mean, I'm definitely in the full. It's definitely full bodied now.
No question about it.
It's still incredibly smooth, incredibly silky, nutty, rich, but it's also starting to assert its authority on the palate, I think.
Well, it complements this coffee very well.
Oh, yes. This is a wonderful cigar to smoke, especially with black coffee. I like my coffee black. I think this is a great cigar pairing coffee.
And, hanging out in the lounge more and hanging out with all the customers, I've been starting to use less creamer. Yeah. And I've been trying to pull back from using sugar in my coffee. So all I used today was just sugar in my coffee. And it's perfect, man. This is a great coffee, a great cigar, great pairing.
Well, it helps that here at Union, you guys serve real coffee. This is not some fucking donut shop, K-cup in a Keurig. This is like you weigh out the beans, grind them fresh. There's still oil in the beans.
Right.
Like, this is real coffee. And it's one of the reasons I love Union Cigar is that makes the cigar smoking experience more pleasurable. The last thing you want is to pair some shitty drink with your cigar.
Right.
Well, it's not the last thing. The last thing I want is to go wait in that goddamn line at Dunkin' Donuts that wraps out into the highway to try to. And Dunkin's coffee's not that great. Don't tell anyone I said that. By the way, if Dunkin' wants to advertise on this show, I take it all back.
Absolutely. Or Starbucks.
Or Starbucks, yeah. So Vitolas. We're going to talk about Vitolas today, and I got to be honest with you, this may end up being a multi-part series because this is a very, very big, in-depth topic.
Oh, absolutely.
So Vitola is the name for your cigar presentation, size and shape. And so if you hear the word Vitola, that's all they mean. Like, take a any cigar like this Oliva, Serie, Melania, Maduro, Union has 2 Vitolas on the shelf. I think one is a Robusto, and then there's this Figurado. Well, what's the difference? And it's the size and shape.
So before we dive into that, really quick, what are your favorite Vitolas?
I think my favorite is the Corona.
Okay.
One reason is the ratio of wrapper to the rest of the cigar means it's usually pretty flavorful. The second is it's a shorter smoke. So if something comes up, and you know me, like I'm high speed, low drag,
That's
which
right.
is a polite way of saying ADHD. I've always got irons in the fire, and I might need to go do something or think I need to go do something, and then I can usually finish the cigar. But if I don't, I'd feel less guilty.
Right.
I think it's a great portable cigar, and then if I want to spend longer smoking, I can smoke 2 of them. Right.
Right.
I have really switched over to Toro for a lot of cigars because most of the blenders in the old days, and I'm going to say pre-2010, the shape that the blenders would make to taste their cigars was the Corona.
Right.
That's how the cigar is supposed to taste. All of the guys that I've talked to or heard talking about it since 2010 or so, they're actually blending in the Toro, and that's what they're tasting and blending to because that's what sells the most in the United States, which is a huge cigar market, the hugest cigar market right now. And so with the Toro, you're kind of getting how the cigar is supposed to taste, and I like to start there. I might switch later. Now, having said all that, if I have the opportunity to buy a Figurado, I do because it's probably going to be blended or wrapped by, I should say, a roller that has a lot of experience. So that's kind of like how I choose
There you go.
my Vitolas. So I think where we need to start here is the difference between size and shape. And we'll start with size because it's easy. Cigars are measured in ring gauge. So when we say size, there's a length and then there's a girth.
And that's what they call me is Girth. That is my nickname. That is my legal nickname.
I was waiting for all of the jokes here.
That's right.
So a ring gauge is a 64th of an inch. So if you have like the inch by Carrillo, that is a 64 ring gauge cigar. It's 1 inch in diameter. And then you have the length, which is typically in inches in America. Now, if you're in Europe or even South America, sometimes they'll go by millimeters. But the girth is always ring gauge, right? So we'll get into that a little bit more. But for size, it's how thick is the cigar and how long is the cigar. And then the harder part, right, if you want to learn all of this, is the shape. So there's 2 main buckets, right? The Parejo and the Figurado. Parejo is your traditional round cap, straight cigar. And there's really only 3 kind of different shapes for Parejo. You have your traditional, which is just Parejo. That's what it's called. That's your traditional. It's a round stick. It's square cut on one end, and it's round capped at the other. That's a Parejo. And then you have box pressed, which is the same thing, but they throw it in a box. Now it's kind of square. And then the last one, which is so rare, I'm not aware of any on the market right now. That's your culebra, which means snake. That's where they take the 3 and they twist them together. And what you're supposed to do is, like, for a wedding or something, you buy one of these and then you separate them. And one goes to the groom, one goes to the best man, one goes to the father of the bride. But you're actually supposed to smoke all 3 together.
Right.
That's the correct way to smoke it. And they're typically, like, all 3 different. It's almost like 3 cigarillos or lanceros twisted together. And they're different, but when you smoke them together, it's a totally different experience.
I follow a beautiful blender from Florida, actually, on Instagram, I should say. I follow her on Instagram, and she rolls those, and she always posts them. I wish I knew her name, but those cigars look beautiful.
You know, I'll bet if she was advertising on this show, we could remember her name.
I know, right?
So, so those are your Parejos, and then you have the Figurado. The traditional figurado is the torpedo. That is basically like a regular Parejo cigar, except the end that you put in your mouth comes down to a point, right? So one of the benefits of a torpedo is you can sort of clip the end, and if you're not drawing enough smoke, you can clip a little bit more off. So with a torpedo, you always want to start, with not taking off too much, and then take off a little bit more if you need to, a little bit more if you need to, right? And then you have the bellicoso. The bellicoso is like a bastard child of a torpedo and a parejo, where it just has it does come to a point, but very rapidly, right? So it's a very sudden radius from perpendicular to coming to a point. It's harder than a torpedo to like take more off if you need to, but it provides a bigger shoulder than a standard parejo. The problem with a standard cigar is if you overclip, you're screwed. You can't undo it.
Yeah.
The bellicoso, it's hard to take off too much. It's hard to take off more. So that's your bellicoso. Then you have the pyramid or pyramid. That's like widest at the end, and then it sort of slopes gradually, like at an angle, and then at the end turns into a torpedo. So the head of the cigar is narrower than the foot, but then it has a torpedo end to it. And then you have the perfecto, which this is actually my favorite cigar shape, but it's sort of like a double torpedo. Like it's a torpedo on both ends. I really like that particular shape because it has the torpedo end where I can take off more if I need to get more smoke. And then the way that it burns, like when you first start out, it's extremely rich because of the ratio of the wrapper to everything else. And the draw is a little more difficult, a little stronger, harder draw. And then it opens up and it mellows out and you're getting more smoke. And so like the experience changes as you smoke it. So I really like it. And then you have to be a really skilled roller to make them.
Right.
And so the construction is always usually pretty good. And then, of course, the final classic, like generally agreed upon figurado is the chisel. I'm not sure, like, why they came up with the chisel tip, like if it has some special reason for being. I tried, like, Googling it. I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, I'm not too sure, but they are pretty interesting.
All right, so those are your kind of your big categories of shape that everybody agrees on. And this is where the complication comes in, is you have companies that come up with their own vitolas in order to, like, it's for branding, right, purposes. And so there are some vitolas you'll see, like, on the box that, maybe you don't recognize. Why are they calling this a Grand Rotunda? I mean,
Right.
Well, it's a branding issue, for that particular cigar company. And so that's why I went over like the generally accepted shapes first. Like anything that you smoke can fall into one of these shapes. Now, when you combine the shapes with the size, that is the length and girth, that's when you start getting into more complicated vitolas, because you have one name that includes both the shape and the size. So a Gordo, for example,
That's
is
my favorite, by the way.
your favorite, right?
I love Gordo cigars.
A Parejo shape, a ring gauge of, what do you say the smallest Gordo is?
I usually see them about 6x60.
6x60 is definitely your normal, right? They do get bigger than 60. They don't really get smaller. And anything shorter than a 60 is not really a Gordo. And again, that's where the complication comes in. Like, what's a nub? A nub is half a Gordo.
Right.
So what do you call it? Well, you call it a nub.
Right.
So starting with the shape of Parejo, now you're combining the size with the shape. Okay? So these are your traditional cigar vitolas. Petite Corona, or half Corona, That's going to be like your 4.5 by 42. Then you have the Gordito. That's like your 4.5 by 60. That's really similar to a nub, maybe a little longer than a nub, but Gordito. Then you have your Robusto. This is a very common Vitola, also sometimes called a Rothschild. That's your 5 by 50. Then you have your Corona. That's usually like 5.25 by 42, so it's longer and narrower. Then you have your Toro. That's your 6 by 50, standard size. And then your Gordo, which is 6 by 60. And then you have your Panatella. That's we would almost call it a cigarillo, maybe a little longer, but that's like a 6 by 34. Your Lonsdale, or Cervantes, that's your 6.5 by 42. And then you have your Churchill, which is sometimes called a Toro Grande because it's a 48 like a Toro, but it's typically 7 inches long, right? Your Lancero, which is 7.5 by 38, so long, narrow ring gauge. Then your double Corona, which is literally a double Corona, because that's like a 7.5 by 50. And then your Grand Corona, or Presidente, which is 9.5 by 47, 48, something like that, right? So best thing you can do is Google image search, like cigar sizes, and you can kind of put like a shape to the name. And that also helps when you have some of those special branding type of cigars. What is it really? You know, they're calling it something fancy and cool, but what is it really, or what is it close to?
Right. This will be an excellent show for the nerds that want to dive really deep into the cigars and really get an understanding of what they're smoking. I think this will be a great episode for that.
Yeah, definitely, because what you have is 3 variables, right? You have the shape, then you have the length, and then you have the girth, and how you combine them together determines the Vitola. Mm-hmm. Now, those were all Parejo sizes, right? Those are traditional recognized Parejo sizes, or Vitolas, I should say. What about figurados? So with the figurado, you have 5 universally recognized Vitolas, right? You have the Torpedo, that's a 6 by 48. You have the Bellicoso, which is typically a 5.5 by 50. You have the Pyramid, which is 6 by 52. And again, the ring gauge is typically at the foot of the cigar. And you remember it's slowly getting narrower. So it gets down to like a 48 and then torpedoes off, right? And then the Salomon, or Salomon Perfecto, which is a 7.25 or so by 57. Again, that ring gauge is in the middle of the cigar. It tapers down on both ends. And then the Diademas Perfecto, which is 8 by 55. So it's like a big Salomon, right? So Perfecto, that's the shape. The Salomon Perfecto, 7.25 by 57, something like that. The Diademas is bigger, so it's 8 by 55. It's a little narrower in the middle, typically, than a Salomon, which is my preferred shape, and longer, which also means longer smoke. So that's pretty much all I have for this episode. I think we can probably give this another go in another episode. There's so much to unpack here.
I think we should.
I think the main takeaway for all of our listeners out there is there are 3 dimensions to the Cigar Vitola. One is the shape, one is the length, and one is the girth. And we will not make any jokes about that. But that's your Cigar Vitolas. And with that, it's time to talk about what really grinds our gears.
You know what really grinds my gears?
Keith, what really grinds your gears today?
Oh, man, I got a good one. So when I'm in a lounge, or really anywhere in the world, but more specifically when I'm hanging out in the lounge, there's always that guy that just wants to one-up you in every conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, they have more money than you. They smoked a better cigar than you've had. They've been all over the world, and they just got to rub it into your face. Mm-hmm. I absolutely hate seeing this guy. I don't want to talk to this guy. It just spoils the mood.
Don't tell me about your 3 wisdom tooth tail.
Right.
Yeah.
you can have a guy who's like, they're enjoying a nice cigar, they're having a Padron, and some guy would be like, oh well, while I was in the Swiss Alps, I enjoyed that cigar, or I was sailing on my yacht to the Caribbeans and I had that cigar and I had a really great time there. Like, my guy, you had the cigar. That's all I needed to hear.
I have 10 boxes of these in my basement.
Right. Yeah. Perfect example. One of our guys, he was so proud that he converted this beautiful shelf into a nice humidor. It's like one of those kitchen cabinet kind of things. He converted that to a humidor. He was showing me pictures of it's all hand done. Looks beautiful. It's great. It holds about 1,000 cigars in it. And this guy, not even involved in the conversation, walks on over. He's like, oh yeah, well, I took one of our walk-in closets that we don't use in the house, and I converted that, and that can hold about 30,000 cigars.
I bought a farmhouse out in the country, and it's just a walk-in humidor now.
Right, yeah.
I pull up in my Porsche Panamera and just load up the trunk once a month.
Right.
When I was out with the Viceroy of Montpelier and we were on his 60,000-foot yacht, we were smoking 17 boxes of these, and let me tell you what, with that whiskey and the babes, and
Yeah. We can talk about how, we like Buffalo Trace, and there's that guy who's like, oh, I got like 20 bottles in my personal bar. Okay, guy.
Well, that's the same mash bill as the Four Roses that you can buy for $12.99. So if you're really smart, you look at me, I'm special.
No, but I mean, there's always somebody in the world who has more money, who better looking, who's more traveled. Arnold Schwarzenegger, if he walks into this lounge, everybody would shut up because we can't compete. This guy is world class.
And what's the difference? The difference is Arnold would make you feel special.
He would.
He wouldn't act
compliment
that way.
you.
And I'm going to give a little tip to everybody out there while we're talking about one-upping. The definition of a gentleman is somebody who makes the person they're talking with feel better after the conversation rather than worse. And it's so easy to build relationships and have a good community if you are just self-aware enough to stop being such a self-centered asshole.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah, so what grinds your gears, John?
What grinds my gears? Mismatched clothes. I'm going to go ahead and be a little petty here, but we're grown-ups. It's okay to take the extra 2 seconds to look nice. I'm not saying that you have to, dress out of the Michael Kors catalog. What I'm saying is just match your clothes. Don't wear stuff that clashes. You don't want to, stand out as somebody that, doesn't put thought and attention to yourself, because if you don't care for yourself, then who's going to care for you?
Right. Now, are you saying that just by color, or are you saying that by the occasion? Like, if I had let's say I had a blazer, right, and some gym shorts and flip-flops, but they're matching colors, would that grind your gear still?
Yeah, that would grind my gears. I mean, it depends. If you were like going to a crypto conference, you could probably pull that off. But for the rest,
shout out to Dan Kelly, right?
shout out for sure. But yeah, I mean, you do want to match to the occasion. I'm not going to wear a 3-piece suit to, go collect garbage, right. And I'm not going to wear my garbage man outfit to the cigar lounge.
Ooh, that's a good one too.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with like sweatpants and a sweatshirt, but like they should match. And then don't wear that with a pair of, $400 monk strap shoes. Wear it with sneakers.
Right.
But then, if you're going to wear sneakers with your suit, you better have like some problems with your feet, and they better be nice sneakers, Shout out to Dr. House.
Right.
But yeah, matching to the occasion, matching the wardrobe to itself, matching textures, matching colors. Sure, you can get into it as much as you want, but the point is nobody is going to respect you more than you respect yourself.
Amen.
If you find that person, that's like a saint. That's like Mahatma Gandhi or some Zen monk. But for the rest of the population, they assume you want to be treated the way you treated yourself. Right?
I like that.
So that's what grinds my gears. And with that, let's return to the cigar. I'm down into the second, third, first comment. I know that I'm talking a lot, so I'm not puffing on the cigar as much as I should. But I'm puffing enough. I haven't had to relit.
Yeah.
It's burning nice and even. And my first thought is it's much stronger than it was in the first third.
And that's something I have to compliment. Neither one of us had to touch up the cigar. It burned evenly the whole way through, consistently too. Like there's no holes, there's no inconsistency. That burn line is strong.
No, this is a very well constructed cigar, and I would say that at the price point of $17.25, you're getting your money's worth.
Absolutely.
It's a
Every dime.
well constructed cigar. Yes, very impressed with how it's burned. And going back to the flavor, definitely a full bodied cigar. I think the pepper has picked up for me. I think I'm tasting more of the sun grown Nicaraguan tobacco now. The chocolate is still there, and it's like that rich, creamy overtone just hasn't gone away. Let me take a few puffs and while you share your thoughts.
Yeah, so I've been chugging down my coffee. So for me, that spice, it's kind of numbed. For me, I'm getting more that espresso flavors coming out because of the coffee. You know, I'm getting a lot more of that cream, that velvety mouthfeel, that silkiness, that smoothness. A lot of that cocoa espresso flavors. And like you said earlier, that mouthfeel from when you have like a bite of almonds or some kind of cashew. Just a great overall experience. And I'm thinking one of these days, you know, we keep complimenting these cigars, and one of these days, you know, we got to smoke a cigar that just sucks.
Yeah.
We need to.
I'm sure it's going to happen by accident or otherwise. So I'm going to add another compliment to this cigar. You know, when we talk about the cigar smoking experience, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. But if you're going to go out of your way to, you know, enjoy a cigar in the lounge, especially one that costs this much, you want to involve all your senses. And I talked the other week about wine tasting. You know, they clink the glass, you know, to involve their ears. They swirl the wine, look at the legs to involve their eyes, you know, nose, taste, all of that. And you can do something similar with cigars. And I just want to compliment the feel of the wrapper in my fingers. This wrapper has a delightfully tactile finish that's almost like velvet, or do you know what flocking is?
No, I do not.
So it's that fuzzy layer that you'll see sometimes on tables like this poker table. Mm-hmm. Now, this has cloth spread over it, but sometimes you'll have tables where it's literally they put down a layer of glue and then they blow fuzz on top of it, and that's called flocking. And this cigar feels flocked. It has that very tactile feeling like velvet in your fingers, and it actually adds to the experience quite a bit. You know, it feels like I'm holding something that is substantial and special, and it just adds to the overall experience.
So you had mentioned earlier, you just said sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Were you quoting Bukowski there?
I think I was.
I think he said
Yes,
that sometimes a story is just a story and the cigar is just a cigar. I think it's something like that.
Or maybe that was Bill Clinton, but somebody
I'm going to Google that now.
Somebody said a cigar is just a cigar, and we will now credit me for that. Yeah, I would say, where does this cigar fit in my cigar smoking repertoire? Okay, so I think it's easiest to start out with what this cigar is not, right? Like, this is not a boating cigar.
I would say it's not a boating cigar, but it is a yacht cigar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally different.
So let me backtrack. That was not Bukowski that said that. That was Sigmund Freud.
I'll bet he would have a field day with Bill Clinton.
Oh, my God, yeah. So I would agree this is definitely not a boating cigar. This is not a fishing cigar. Nor
Not
is
a
it
lawn mowing cigar.
No, this is...
It's not an activity cigar.
No.
And I will tell you, I'm halfway through, and the strength has picked up to the point where I think if you smoke this cigar down, you're going to want to be seated and maybe have a full stomach. I wouldn't call it a breakfast cigar.
No. Even though we're having this at 9:50 a.m. With our coffee. No, this is definitely a cigar that, you know, a celebratory cigar. Mm-hmm. This is a very good cigar for, you know, post-dinner.
I was going to say, after a steak dinner,
yes,
this cigar would hit the spot.
Or with steak dinner.
Or with. Look at that ash, man.
It's holding perfectly.
I mean, this is a very well-constructed cigar. I love it. Yeah, so celebratory.
You're on the boat. You're not necessarily like fishing on a boat, but if you're
like on a yacht,
you're on a yacht. You guys are anchored and you're just hanging out and drinking, whatever it may be. You're celebrating.
I think this is a cigar that I would want to pay attention to.
Yes,
I would say this is probably not a cigar to do while you're doing something else.
Yeah.
I think this is the kind of cigar like I want to enjoy a cigar. Mm-hmm. And not that you couldn't do those other things. It's just it would be a waste,
Right.
Because there's so much nuance and flavor and experience with it. I feel like this is the kind of cigar you want to sit down and enjoy it.
Here we go. Here's a new category: a lounge cigar. Because oftentimes I'll say, this is a poker cigar or a football cigar. No, you want this to be the experience, the highlight of that smoke.
And I feel like it's a great, great lounge cigar to smoke with another cigar apasionado, someone that you can talk about it with, because I think sharing our tasting notes and, kind of doing this together heightens my enjoyment of it. Like, this is the kind of cigar you can actually talk about while you're smoking it. It is that good. And I would say that in terms of value, it's a decent value. Like, for $17.25, it's not an affordable cigar, but you definitely get your money's worth. I mean, for this cigar in this size, 6.5 by 52 is a decent amount of tobacco. I can see this retailing for, low 20s and be perfectly fair.
Which in some states you're going to find that.
Yeah, that's true. They probably have to keep the MSRP down because of these communist states like Vermont that want to put cigars out of business.
Or New York, how they're incenting, what is it, a 125% sales tax, I believe, on tobacco or cigars?
You fuckheads in New York need to get your shit together.
I think it's currently at 75%, and they're going to up it to 125. That's insane.
Let me explain economics to you and how you can make more tax revenue. Or not. But anyway, I think they could charge more and it would still be fair. So I see this as a really good value. Like, if you want a...
Well, don't tell them that, because they might do it.
they might... next year it's going to cost more. So worth the price. Now, I've smoked some good cigars that were overpriced. I'm not going to name them. We can smoke them on the show, maybe. Anything that starts with a co and ends with a ba. Like, they're good cigars, but they're overpriced. I don't think this one is. I think, if anything, it's maybe underpriced a little bit. So I like that feature of it.
It's underpriced until this podcast gets big. Then,
right. Then we're going to start getting the hate mail and stuff like that.
So how much does a movie ticket cost these days? It's like what, like $12
for a matinee,
right? Get your popcorn, get that. By the end of your ticket, you're gonna be paying about like $20. I would much rather, in that hour and a half that I'm sitting there, I'd rather have the cigar than watch a movie. Well, maybe watch a movie with the cigar, but I'm just saying, like, I'd rather, for that price, $20 ish.
It's a good cost per time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So we are about ready to wrap up. Do you have any closing thoughts on the Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro?
I mean, we pretty much nailed everything. Interesting Vitola. Very fun cigar. Very flavorful. Well worth the money.
I think it's mature, right? I wouldn't say that it's serious, but it's definitely mature. It's got, it just hits everything. It hits the mouth feel and the palate. It hits the finger feel and tactile sensation. The flavor is bold and complex, and it changes as you smoke it. The construction is superb. I'm holding like a 1-inch ash right now with no problem. Construction is great.
In that ash right now.
Yeah, I mean, 10 out of 10 for sure, and it's at a good, reasonable price point. And that's it. Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro. You can pick one up here at Union Cigar, Hanover, Pennsylvania, USA for $17.25. Or a box of 10 for $138, a savings of $35. So drop into your local brick and mortar and pick yourself up a box and enjoy them with yourself or a friend. Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.